Hey there, everybody. I'm Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome to the Mad Science Lab podcast. How about that? We're one for one. My cue cards are working so far. Testing out some new graphics, and today we'll be continuing on with the My Thoughts on My Team series. And we have with us Ryan Wormeli from Fantasy Pros to break down the Baltimore Ravens. Was that your team of choice, or did you just take whoever was left? I can't recall.
That was my team of choice. I am a longtime Ravens fan, been a fan since Joe Flacco's era began back in 2008. So I was happy to jump on the Ravens when they were available.
Joe Flacco. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me. I know most people know where to find you, but would you like to tell everyone where to find you just in case they don't know?
Yeah, definitely. I do all my stuff with Fantasy Pros. We're at Fantasy Pros, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm the social media manager there. And then I also get to host the podcast every now and then, especially during the season. So follow us there wherever you get your podcast. I'm at Ryan Wormeli on Twitter. That's Wormeli, like how you dress when it's cold outside. And kudos to you on getting the name pronunciation correct. Most people, when they read it, they assume it's Wormeli. It is Wormeli, so I appreciate you getting that right. Also, I have to say, I really appreciate the Breaking Bad music. That's a very nice touch on the
Yeah, until I get sued.
Yeah. For the time being, it's a very nice touch.
You cracked me up. I swear. Every time I hear your intro and you say warmly like how you dress when it's cold outside, I crack up.
Well, so my grandfather used to say it's like the opposite of coldly, and then my dad always says it's like how you dress when it's cold outside. And I always, since that's what my dad said, I always sort of adopted that for myself because it doesn't look like it's spelled, but it's a fun.
No, I thought that was actually your real name, Warmly, and then I looked at it, I'm like, okay, I had to type it in, spelled differently. I'm like, don't type Warmly. So, all right, moment of truth here. I'm going to transition into the graphics. Let's see if I can do it right the first time.
Looks good to me.
Pretty much. It's not exactly how I wanted it. One sec. There we go.
We got it.
One extra button. All right. We are good to go. All right. Some of these, are a little more interesting than others. So we'll start with the quarterback position. There is absolutely nothing to see here. Lamar has signed his extension. He's going to be the starter. And for the sake of the Ravens and fantasy owners, they hope they never see Tyler Huntley again. Lamar, pretty much top 6, top 3 in your rankings. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you could make a case for anywhere in that range. It's funny, when you first, invited me to be on the show, I said, well, I'll take the Ravens, but hopefully it's not just me yelling Lamar, 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 Lamar this whole time. Thankfully, he actually was signed, so we have some clarity here. And all of a sudden, it looks like a really good offense. Obviously, Lamar will be at the center of it. I think, obviously guys like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts with what he did last year clearly are going to be ahead. Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback in football. I think there's a really strong case to be made for Lamar anywhere in that 3 to 6 range, like you said. I think you could make a case for a guy like Joe Burrow, maybe a case for Justin Herbert if you believe in the new offensive coordinator out there. But Lamar, if healthy, is going to be a dynamic runner. We know that. He now has by far the best set of weapons to throw to that he's ever had in his career. He has now a healthy J.K. Dobbins to take some of the load off of him. I think the offensive line is the best it's been since that epic 2019 season. There is everything pointing the arrow is up for Lamar, except for just the fact that he's coming off 2 big injuries in back-to-back years. So ignoring that from the equation, which to a degree is true for everybody. So I kind of do ignore it unless I think it's really a long-term problem. So ignoring that from the equation, there's really no argument for him outside your top 5. And like I said, I think a pretty good one for him at 3.
The only concern I have, now that he's gotten his money and he's coming off an injury, rushing production's a big thing for him. You at all worried that maybe he makes a business decision from here, on occasion, maybe rushes a little less or doesn't go in for those goal line carries, trying to save his wear and tear?
I think it would be less a business decision by Lamar and more a business decision by the Ravens to say, hey, we now have all this invested in you and our future. The highest paid player in NFL history, that's not going to last for a long time. Obviously, that's the way quarterback contracts work. Yeah, exactly. But
who's due next? Burrow?
It's Burrow, probably, maybe Herbert. I guess it kind of depends whichever agent gets one done first, right? But it'll be one of those two. But Lamar, I think, wants to run to the degree that he thinks it can help the team win, right? I think Lamar, for all the talk about like him kind of sitting out in the playoffs last year and him waiting to get the bag dropped on him, I think he really, really is an uber competitor at heart. And I think if he thinks running the ball will help them win, he's going to do it. The question to me will be, will the Ravens want him to run as much now that A, they're invested so much in him? B, they have this data point back-to-back years of him getting hurt, even though those were both in the pocket. But C, the fact that they now have all these weapons he can throw to. They're not solely reliant on being a successful offense based on his legs anymore. They now have Odell and Zay and Rashad Bateman coming back healthy and Mark Andrews. And we'll get to those guys in a second. They also have Todd Monken, who is very happy to throw the ball. Monken, I really like the hire because he's very willing to adapt his offensive scheme and play calling to whoever he has on the roster. I think every coach should do that more. Too many coaches in football are like, you have to adapt to my scheme. He adapts his scheme to the guys he has. They have a lot of guys that can now catch the ball and do exciting things after the catch. So I don't think they're going to rely on as much on his legs, but I still think he's going to be very efficient when running. But I still think he'll get his 50 yards a game, even if he only runs 3 or 4 times, because he's going to break a long one. That's just what he does. And it's not like he's old yet. He's 25 years old. He's still
Yeah.
very dynamic, very talented as a runner. I'm really excited to see him in this offense. I think we'll get both the throwing and the running.
Yeah, I just think they might protect their investment a little more. You'd
Yeah.
have to almost. It's like with Josh Allen. Sooner or later, the Bills got to say, "Man, you're going to get yourself killed out here," and just tell them
Yeah,
to rein it in a
and it's
little
always
bit.
interesting too, right? When what makes the quarterback special is the thing that you want to kind of hide him from. I think Lamar is a much better thrower than he gets credit for. I've thought that since he was a rookie. He's gotten a lot of, I think, very unfair hate towards his throwing ability. But it's clear, even to somebody who is an apologist, that the legs are what it takes him from a good quarterback
Yeah,
to a great,
absolutely.
special, all-time elite one. So if you're not going to take advantage of that, I think you're limiting your ceiling. I think they're going to try and find the right balance. I don't know what that balance is. I'm sure they're going to put a lot of time thinking about it this summer into what is the right balance between, taking care of our investment and actually trying to go out and win games when we have a really good team.
Exactly. Well, so like I said, pretty straightforward on quarterback. So we'll transition to one of the more interesting positions here on running back. As I always say, these are the ESPN projected lineups. So they have it as Dobbins with Gus Edwards as the backup, and then the bench or backups are Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell. I find this team interesting. J.K. Dobbins, I think year 2 post ACL, they normally ramp up. I'm trying to buy him everywhere. And despite the fact that they didn't really add anyone in the draft, and he's ramping up second year post ACL, his price hasn't gone up all that much in at least the casual leagues I've seen. He's someone I'm targeting everywhere. Gus and Justice Hill are more like late round stashes, injury stashes if you have to. Keaton Mitchell was a guy I really liked. I know the draft capital's not there, but if he were to ever get a chance, if Dobbins were to re-aggravate the injury, I think he has some really solid potential. But the main thing I'm taking out of this backfield is that Dobbins is screaming buy right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to roster J.K. Dobbins in a lot of my
Yeah,
leagues this season. I think he is massively undervalued. I think just when looking at the team as a whole from like a fandom perspective and how are they going to do in the AFC this year, I think he's getting underrated, let alone actual fantasy where you're going to get to take advantage of that value and get those just, I think, really cheap fantasy points on your roster. Going into the year when he was hurt, that training camp, the people around Baltimore were talking about J.K. Dobbins like he was about to be the most productive running back in the NFL. He
yeah,
is very good running out of the shotgun, which Lamar Jackson loves to do. He's obviously super talented. He has the draft capital. He was a second-round pick out of Ohio State. Just super talented guy, really hard worker, a perfect fit for the offense that they were in,
yeah,
even with Roman. And then he got hurt. And it was a much worse knee injury than even just your typical ACL tear. So it took a while for him to sort of get back last season. Even last season when he had successful games, you saw some of those long
yeah.
breakout runs. He kind of had
He's
that hitch in
limping.
his step,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah,
looked like
absolutely.
it looked bad. I think he is an unbelievable value this year. I think he very easily has in his outcome an RB1 level season. I'm not going to say like you should take him in the first round or whatever, because you don't have to, but I
No,
think that range of outcomes is possible for him. I love Dobbins this year. For that reason, I'm probably not going to have a lot of these other guys. I do think it's really telling that the Ravens historically love taking a day 3 running back. They love in that 4th or 5th round taking a guy that they think is really talented just to have depth in that running back room. And they didn't do that this year. I do like Keaton Mitchell a lot. And if Dobbins were to get re-injured, I would be all over Mitchell, like on the waiver wires. Probably not a guy I'm going to draft or anything. I'm not going to
No.
draft Justice Hill. I'll probably take Gus Edwards because he's going to contribute and would be an
Yeah.
amazing handcuff if Dobbins does go down. But I think the fact that they didn't draft a running back earlier in the draft tells you that they really believe Dobbins is back to full health. I think he's going to be a monster this year, and their defenses are not going to be able to key in on him because they have all these wide receivers now, and because it's a more diversified passing attack from Todd Monken, and because Lamar's healthy again. Like, I think the sky is truly the limit for Dobbins. I am really, really bullish on him.
But even Sunday, I made a trade for him. Post draft, when the Ravens had essentially done nothing, they got Keaton Mitchell, but that's not really a big threat. Yeah. Even knowing that he should be healthy and ready to go, I got him for the 206 in a dynasty league. Wow. After everyone, look, the second round of dynasty picks plummeted in value this week. So the 206 for J.K. Dobbins shows you, obviously, in some of the expert analyst leagues, probably not going to be low, like that low in value, but I got him for the 206, and I was absolutely mystified. I would have given somewhere in the range of a first round rookie pick.
Yeah, you should be thrilled. I did actually buy him in a dynasty league. This was before the draft. I was just taking a chance that I thought the Ravens were gonna, kind of buy in on him for this year again. And I paid a late first for him, and I don't know that that's a crazy value, but I'm really happy with that, especially because you saw a lot of this depth in the rookie draft, like you mentioned, kind of go down in value. Yeah. With the way the NFL draft played out. So I think a late first for Dobbins is perfectly good value. And if you're a team that is a running back shy of competing, like, I wouldn't even hesitate. That's a no-brainer for me.
I think if it's like the 111, 112, I think it's a steal because post-draft you're looking at now Jonathan Mingo and Devon Achane have been the 11, 12 in the drafts I've done and seen. I'd take Dobbins over both of them combined. So
yeah, 10 times out of 10.
I think that's a steal. Moving on to one of the more interesting positions where nobody knows really what the heck to make out of it. You have the wide receiver room of Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, and Odell Beckham. I believe ESPN had Devin Duvernay in. I decided I wanted Zay Flowers in there, so he's been bumped up. They also have Dante Demas, Devin Duvernay, Nelson Aguilar, and James Proche. I'm not sure what to make of this. I think I'm going to try and diversify my shares of these players because I'm not really all that high on anyone, but I don't think you're going to have to pay up for them. These are all guys that should be going outside the top 5 rounds. What are your thoughts? I'm not really sure what to make of this room.
Yeah, well, we could spend the whole episode on wide receiver, right? I mean, there's so many different kind of iterations and ways we could see this really play out over the course of the season. Odell obviously was hurt all last year, but he still looked pretty good in LA, in that Super Bowl run, getting hurt in the Super Bowl. When healthy, I think he's still an uber talented guy who can do a lot of fun things. Rashad Bateman looked like a burgeoning star, especially as a deep threat, which I hadn't really expected out of him when he was drafted out of Minnesota early last season. Then he gets hurt, second straight year. Obviously, he's dealt with injuries. And Zay Flowers, the Ravens, I think a lot of times you hear teams say, oh, well, he was the top guy at the position on our draft board. You don't hear them usually say it as emphatically as the Ravens did, which is John Harbaugh said every single scout, 100% consensus in their front office agreed that Zay was the number 1 receiver on the board. There was no dissenting votes against him. It was all Zay. That's really kind of meaningful in my eyes. I think they really believe him. Now, you could make the argument that they've drafted wide receivers historically so poorly that maybe they shouldn't have taken the guy that was number 1 on their board. But Zay Flowers is obviously a super talented guy as well. I think what's really exciting to me about this wide receiver trio, and Yahoo's Matt Harmon did a really good job of highlighting this with reception perception, which I'm sure your listeners are aware of.
He normally does a good job, yeah.
He does a fantastic job with the receivers, and he highlighted the fact that all 3 of those guys, Rashad, Zay, and Odell, can all do pretty much everything on the field. It's not a situation where you're going to say, well, Hollywood Brown is out there. He's basically running 9 routes and is only a deep threat. Every one of these guys can do everything. They can all do work with the ball in their hands. They can all win off the line. They can do everything it takes to be a successful receiver. So I think it's really exciting. It's going to make it a challenge for fantasy owners. I think you just take whichever one you can think you can get the best value on and say, hopefully that's the guy that ends up being, the top target in the offense. I want to point out, I don't know how much he'll do this year. year. Dante Demas was one of my favorite undrafted free agents that any team took. I went to University of Maryland, so I'm also a Terrapins fan. I watched a lot of Demas in college. Before his injury, which happened not this past year, but the year before, he looked like a monster. He looked like, to me, like a round 2 wide receiver. He was a beast. He wins with size. He has enough speed. He has great body control. I think Demas is really, really talented. He did not look like the same guy last year, but he was also coming off a devastating knee injury. So I don't know that I would draft him this year. You're certainly not going to have to. Nobody's going to be,
No.
really high on him in fantasy
Yeah.
drafts, but he's a guy. If he has a good game or two kind of early, if he makes a team, quite frankly, but if makes a team and has a good game or two early, there might be some hype starting to grow. I would not mind taking a flyer on him. If you're like in a deep dynasty league and needing to look for somebody or something like that, I think he's a really talented guy, and there will be opportunities here because the one thing that this Ravens offense doesn't necessarily have is the sort of that big wide receiver that's going to body you in the end zone. They have Mark Andrews, but they don't have that at the receiver position. I think if Demas gets back to being truly healthy and looks like he did before the injury in his junior season, he could be that guy in Baltimore.
I think I'm going to take the excuse me, the same approach to this wide receiver room that I take to ambiguous backfields, and I'm going to take whoever I can get cheapest because,
Yep.
I like I said, I'm also going to diversify my shares here. I'll probably have a fair amount of all three. I really enjoy Bateman and Flowers, and I might even add some Demas now. He probably would be someone I would take in the like a Scott Fishbowl or a best ball type. Scott Fishbowl, by the time you're in around what 20, 22, whatever the heck it is, it's take a name that I can actually recognize. So he might be a good target there, but it's going to be all over the place. I don't really want to put all my eggs in one basket, but I could see Demas getting in there if Bateman or Beckham have any health issues again.
And I don't want to totally not mention Duvernay and Aguilar because, the Ravens did sign Aguilar as a free agent. He was one of their first free agents. He might have actually been the first free agent they signed technically this offseason because they didn't do a lot of work when they still had Lamar, on the tag. But I think Aguilar is a guy that they wanted in this offense. He's not going to supplant those top 3 we talked about, but I think he's a guy that they have a vision for how he could fit into a Todd Monken offense. And then Duvernay, they loved him when they drafted him out of Texas in the 3rd round. He actually looked pretty good at times last year. He was a decent red zone threat when Lamar was still healthy and when he was still healthy. They like getting the ball in his hands on jet sweeps. Todd Monken is very willing to get the ball into the hands of his receivers. I think Zay Flowers is going to do that a lot, by the way, on jet sweeps and motions. So what's really exciting to me as a Ravens fan isn't just the guys at the top. It's the fact that there's actually depth in this wide receiver room for the first time in a while.
Yeah,
I think every one of these guys at some point is going to have a good game this season and make you think about maybe rostering them.
That's for sure. Moving on to the final position we have here, tight end, where we have one of the top 2 probably tight ends in the league in Mark Andrews and a backup tight end who would probably be the starting tight end on half the other teams in the NFL. I really like Isaiah Likely, and it's a shame he's behind one of the best.
Yeah, Likely was so fun at times last year, right? He in the preseason in August last year was just making great catch after great catch. He's really good with the ball in his hands after the catch in a way that you don't usually see tight ends be that dynamic. You'll see guys like Travis Kelce who have the speed and the strength to get past guys. Likely will put a juke move on you and he will make you miss in an open field. That's really cool to see as a tight end. But you're right, Mark Andrews is the guy. I think Mark Andrews is still the guy in the entire offense in terms of pass catchers at least. He is a beast. He and Lamar have a great connection. I think it's really good for his outlook that Lamar actually came back because they have such great chemistry. I think, again, I've mentioned his name a bunch. I think it's really good for Mark Andrews that Todd Monken is now the offensive coordinator. A, the more diversified passing attack. B, less pressure there will be on Andrews to be the only guy in the passing attack. But C, Todd Monken just came from Georgia where he had Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, who's going to be the number 1 tight end in the next year's draft class. So he knows how to utilize tight ends to a really strong degree. Like Mark Andrews, obviously you would never, ever take him over Travis Kelce until Kelce proves otherwise. But I am very happy with Mark Andrews as tight end too in any draft. And he's a guy that, if I get a really strong running back at the top of round 1, I'm probably not taking Andrews at the end of round 2. But I'm at least thinking about it, and I'm definitely taking him early round 3. I really like Andrews a lot this year. I think he's going to feast.
Love it. All right. Well, I know you're not a psychic and you don't know what the ADPs are going to be in redraft come actual draft season, in August. So I've been using, just a lot of best ball, but by your best guess, on where you think these guys are going to land in ADP, who would be the prime target for you on this offense?
I think it's Dobbins, but we were pretty effusive with our praise for him earlier. So to give you a second name, I'm going to go with Zay Flowers. I think a lot of people see a rookie going to Baltimore and sort of their inherent biases say, oh, that's a bad landing spot, which I'm not saying it's the best landing spot, but they say that's a bad landing spot, so we're going to drop him down the rankings. I think Zay Flowers is super talented. He was an upperclassman, so he's like been around the block. He's not like some 20-year-old kid who doesn't really know how to play. He's a very well developed route runner, super talented, super athletic. Like, I'm really excited about Zay Flowers, and I think there's a chance that we see him actually elevate to the clear wide receiver one in this offense later in the year. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I think there's value where he will be going in drafts because of the fact that he's in Baltimore and because of the fact that people are kind of biased against Lamar at times, that I think Zay is going to go lower than he should.
No, but two things. I agree. I think J.K. Dobbins was the obvious one, but Zay Flowers in the landing spot. At first, I thought that too, but if you look into it, Quentin Johnston, he's not going to beat out both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. JSN's not going to beat out Lockett and Metcalf.
Mm-hmm.
And who's the one I'm missing? Oh, Jordan Addison is not going to beat out JJ. Zay Flowers is the one who could potentially be the wide receiver one on his team as a rookie. So I don't think the landing spot's as bad as people think.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And how many times have we seen? I mean, Justin Jefferson was the 22nd overall pick in his draft class. We see these wide receivers, they're so much more NFL ready than they were a decade ago when they entered the NFL. And I don't care that he was the third receiver off the board. They all went back to back to back to back. They're basically all in the same range. The Ravens believe in him. They have a new look offense. I don't think the landing spot is as bad as people are saying. And like you said, he is the one of these guys who has the best chance of being his team's leading receiver by the end of the season.
This one's going to be a tough question because I'm looking at all these guys, and with the exception of Lamar, who's going to be high in ADP, I don't think any of them are going to come at a substantial price. But who would be one player on this team you would like to avoid?
I think if I had to avoid somebody, it's probably Odell, just because he is the oldest. He is coming off a very prolonged injury absence, and he is new to the offense. I think he and Lamar are going to get along very well. Lamar came out and asked for the Ravens to sign Odell. It's not like they're going to have bad chemistry, but they haven't played together yet like Lamar has with a lot of the other guys. He hasn't with Zay Flowers, obviously, also. But Odell is the guy that he's got the big name brand. I think he might be the receiver that ends up going higher than anybody in the offense besides Mark Andrews, just because of that name value and the fact that, well, they gave him a big contract. Relatively speaking, they're going to use him a lot. I don't think he's going to be ahead on the pecking order, ahead of Bateman to start the year and ahead of Flowers to end the year. Just because I think those guys are younger, they're more talented. I think they're just better right now than Odell is at his age. I still think Odell's really good and a very valuable piece to this offense, but I think he's valuable in that he makes other players better just by being there and having depth and being another guy on the field that defenses have to pay attention to, less so than being an impactful fantasy asset this year.
Yeah, last I checked, I think he was the highest of the three wide receivers in ADP. Yeah. And like I said, I think I'm just going to take whoever the lowest is, so he would be my avoid. Moving on to the last one here, a sleeper. I was thinking Keaton Mitchell, but you've kind of got me convinced maybe I want to take a couple of late shares here of Dante Demas or put him on my watch list. Who do you have for a sleeper?
Yeah, I like Demas a lot. It might be more of a long-term thing. Yeah. I don't really expect him to be a guy that kind of breaks out in September and is one of those early season waiver wire ads that wins the league for you or anything like that. I'm going to say likely, and it's really just a if Andrews gets hurt kind of thing. You don't often handcuff a tight end, but if Andrews does get hurt, which, I mean, you never know. Tight end's a very physical position. Obviously, he's been banged up at times before. I mean, Isaiah Likely immediately becomes a starting fantasy tight end, if not maybe a top 8 fantasy tight end, given the talent, the fact that he's now in year 2, and tight ends usually do take a year to kind of develop in the NFL. And then obviously the fact that I think this is going to be a more lucrative offense in general for pass catchers. So I think Likely's the guy with the ceiling that I would take a flyer on and say, hey, maybe they use 2 tight ends like Monken did at Georgia, or maybe Andrews gets hurt and all of a sudden I've got this really nice tight end asset on my roster. So I'll say him, but I do like Demas a lot just in terms of the long term.
All right, final part here. Where do you see them finishing in their division? And they finished at 10-7 last year, over or under 10 wins?
I'll say over 10 wins. I'll say that pretty easily. The defense was very good last year after Lamar went down, and Calais Campbell's not back, but and they also still need to address their second cornerback because they didn't do that in the draft. But I think there's a lot of talent on that defense. I think Roquan Smith makes a huge difference. Patrick Queen, they did not pick up his fifth-year option, but he is going to be back for this season. That's a really dynamic linebacker duo. I like some of the other defensive pieces they picked up in the draft. Kyle Hamilton in a year or two. Marcus Williams healthy this year. I think the defense is really, really good. One of the 3 best in the AFC. And then the offense, I think, is one of the 3 or 4 best in the AFC if everybody's healthy. I think people are really kind of overestimating what the offense looked like under Tyler Huntley and forgetting that Lamar Jackson was playing at an MVP level before he got hurt last year. And he is the most dynamic player on every field he steps onto. That Dobbins is healthy again, that they have a lot of wide receiver depth. Like, I think health is the only thing that can slow down this team. I'm going to say, I think if you're projecting, you probably need to say that the Bengals are favorites in the division. But if I'm betting, then I'm taking the Ravens 10 times out of 10 because they are getting better odds than the Bengals.
Yeah, sure.
And I think they have just as good a chance of winning the division.
Perfect. I think I messaged you about this before, about how you had one where you were doing an ad read on your show, and I messaged you and said, wow, you were really talking fast today. And you said, no, they speed the video up. But there's a few times I can tell you're really enthusiastic about the Ravens. I'm going, wow, he's going. Yeah. I don't think they had to speed you up sometimes. You've got a pretty good motor on you. Hey,
those reads, when I'm actually sitting there reading them, the big like BetMGM gambling disclosures, those are like 3-minute reads that we slow down to a minute. Those are really tough to get through. I'm just always proud when I get through it in one take, honestly, because it is a lot of numbers and states to read. But yeah, talking about the Ravens, I'm always gonna be excited and passionate and just happy to talk football. We are this upcoming Saturday, May 6th, is the halfway point between the start of the fantasy offseason and the start of the next season. So we are almost halfway there, guys. Just a few short months left.
Well, thank you for joining me. It was a real pleasure. Like I said, that one time I looked down and I'm going, did I hit the speed up button on my podcast? He's really going. I messaged you and I said, oh, duh, that makes sense. They sped it up. Nobody can talk that fast. Once again, Ryan, thanks for joining me. Would you like to tell everyone again where they can find you?
Yeah. I'm really happy to have come on. Thank you so much for the invite. Anytime you want to talk Ravens or anything, I'll happily join again. But I'm at Ryan Wormeli. Again, that's Wormeli, like how you dress when it's cold outside. That's on Twitter and Instagram. And then you find my stuff and all of our great stuff at Fantasy Pros across everywhere. I do all the social media. So if you like a meme, that's me. If you don't like it, it was probably somebody else.
Fair enough. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Once again, I'm Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and this has been my thoughts on the Baltimore Ravens with Ryan Wormeli, like when it's cold outside. This has been the Mad Science Lab podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Check back tomorrow for the next team in the series. Have a good night.